Thank you, Radhika, and thank you, everyone. Yes, my name's Chris Fleming, and I'm one of the delivery leads at NHS Digital on urgent emergency care. I'm so excited about working in health technology at the moment. I mean, it's just a wonderful time we've had from Simon giving the big picture and talking about the need to marry the technology evolution with also operational transformation, to service design, to standards, to open standards. And so the title of my presentation is Integrating Journeys Across Urgent Emergency Care. And what I want to do is just recap a little bit of the urgent and emergency care context. Then I'm going to show the thing. So someone once said, probably they were from GDS, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, a demo is worth 1,000 pictures. So I'm going to attempt a live demo, so start praying for Chris now, please. Then I'm going to talk about why it matters, and then what next. And Matt Stibbs in his presentation earlier gave a few visuals to kind of communicate, to convey the urgent emergency care system. And I've got some similar ones, although mine have a lot less clip art, so I guess Matt wins that one. But what we have here is the various urgent emergency care settings, but also remember you've got central agencies, whether they are central government agencies, but also local hubs. And information about patients need to flow between those settings, okay? So some of these connections, if you like, exist at the moment. Some don't, some are being worked on, but in each case you need to think about the information model, message standards, the transport, how it gets across, but of course usability as well, how that impacts and fits into clinical workflow. And also, data moves around specific settings, like between ambulance trusts, for instance, or needs to. You could draw many more lines on this urgent emergency care system until it got to a big mess to represent the interoperability needs. But there's also this need for data to flow into the center. So some of these exist now, some are being upgraded, and some are long-term plan priorities. But in each case, we've got information about a patient, and some of that information will be consistent in all cases, but some will have specific elements depending on the use case. So scene information for ambulance dispatch, etc. So there's a challenge of standardizing common elements, but then thinking about also just to make the distinction between the primary use around the outside ring, what's wrong with the patient, why they're here, what do I need to know, and then the secondary use, the management information, is the recipe working at system-wide. But doing that in a way that reduces burden throughout the system. Just as an aside, it's probably worth saying that the former is kind of a mental model I can associate with a bit easier. As people, we move around the system too, but it's probably a different way of expressing it, which is where you have kind of one single longitudinal record and the information flows in and out. So it's kind of a difference analogous to having a Google Doc versus emailing around an individual file, but you get the idea. But either way, standards, APIs, open standards are required to do that in a consistent way. One further point is around common language. So whether it's in urgent care or elsewhere, there's a range of tools being used to support clinicians in figuring out what's wrong with a patient, generally described as a disposition. And to enable some of those flows, we need to figure out a way of describing those dispositions in a canonical way. So thanks to some thinking from our technology experts and the work that James Ray has done with PRSB, it's about breaking down those kind of dispositions into health issues, activity, acuity, and James introduced this concept of a diagnostic discriminator. So what is the type of clinician or investigation that is required to rule out a condition? Because of course, in urgent emergency care, you're not at the end of the journey often. You've got all these transitional points throughout the journey where we have to capture and flow information. So, how do we move to consistent approach in line with NHS policy? We need to do three things. Set out in the specification how information regarding this clinical encounter can flow through the internet using APIs. Second, come up with the standardized way of describing the outcome. And third, figuring out how to accredit, assure that process, and then to implement it. So, I'm just going to, right, here we go. This is where we get to the really exciting bit. I'm going to pull up here. Hopefully this will work. There we go. And you'll have to excuse me bending my neck around to read this. What I'm showing you here is a test harness. So for those not familiar with it, this is basically a sort of lightweight piece of software that enables you to test APIs or new bits of software. And what you can see here is a sort of a synthesized encounter management system. So a synthesized thing that you might use to manage cases in either a contact center or in an online context. And I'm going to show you 3 quick demos to just illustrate some of the opportunities we think exist under this work stream. So firstly, and this kind of screen will be familiar to, I suppose, people, anyone who's worked in and around contact centers, but also, I'll also just challenge you to think this could be some sort of online tool as well. So we choose a user here, and going to choose a clinical decision support tool, and then launch that there. And now we get into the questions. So everyone will be familiar with this kind of workflow. Sorry about the formatting. As I say, it's a lightweight test harness. We haven't bothered to get the padding perfectly on all a little bit, so but hopefully you'll get enough to get the idea. So I'm going to just go through this pathway and answer some questions. And sorry, I'm so used to Macs and I'm on a PC, so I'm just struggling. Right, here we go. Yes, able to walk. And then, yes, up to date with tetanus. So this is for a leg injury pathway, right? And you'll notice at the start I selected the CDSS I wanted to use, which is basically a baked up one with here's one I made earlier, made up CDSS. As you get through the pathway, then as you'd expect, you go through the questions, then it gets you to a disposition. And you can see some information, some care advice, etc. And what the tool does here is it's coding up the assertions that are being made in each of those for each of those questions. So here you can see again. I'm going to shortcut this. Bear with. Sorry, this is very difficult to look behind me like this. But basically what you'll see is, if I scroll down here, is you can see the coded SNOMED values of all the questions, answers, and the information about the patient. And if I could actually work the mouse, I could drop those codes into the term finder, and there you'd find, say, joint deformity, etc. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing, just to show you that pathway. The second thing, I'm just going to end test, is creating a standardized output at the end. So I'm going to choose a different user and a different pathway. This time I'm going to go with palpitations and launch. I'm going to say no, and then naked shoulders. So again, different user, different pathway here. Yes, some shortness of breath, and say no to that one. And here we've got different result, which is an emergency department result. And there's a couple of extra things here that we can do. So again, looking down, you've got chief concern, and it explains the coding system and the different codes that are used there. And then if you wanted, you might be able to have some procedure instructions, refer to cardiology service, again, explaining what the coding system, again, just linking back to the work that Terence was talking about earlier. A couple of extra options here. One is actually viewing the message itself. So for any techies, there's the raw JSON. But the important thing when we're introducing sort of new interoperability on open standards is we need to ensure backwards compatibility. So this checks whether it's the extent to which it conforms to the existing 1.1 report. You see, it's not, some of the validations have failed because this is a work in progress. But that's just an existing test tool that exists on NHS digital website. So far so good. But then, so that's kind of the backwards compatibility. But then, like, how do we look to the future, and what might we be able to do with more coded information? So if we then look at this post-call information, and I'll just so imagine, for instance, I'm just going to resize the window, that you're on an iPad or a mobile phone. This could be the information you then send back to a patient, coded information about their details, their disposition, what was there, etc. And it just starts to show that the more we can create these machine-readable, API-based ways of talking through the system, the more sets of user needs we can meet. Right, one final one. I'm going to go back to the start. A phrase that has been used previously has been omni-channel, okay, by our SRO. So we're in a world of online telephony in multiple different settings. So say for this one, I'm just going to quickly go into vomiting fever, launch that, say no. All right, get through these questions, and let's say vision blurred, no, headache. Now at this point, because I've got the headache, might want to switch pathways or indeed supplier, okay? So I'm going to switch to a headache pathway, but what we've got here is it will continue to code up the questions and answers based on the SNOMED standard, so that when you're switching, could be from online to telephone, could be between tools, you're able to back interrogate what's been asked and answered. And that's really important clinically, of course, and really important for interoperability. Okay, demo's over, and I'm just going to summarize with a few points. So why? Well, I shouldn't have to drain this, I guess, but to quote from the health tech vision, open standards are not an abstract technical goal. They permit interoperability between different regions and systems, and crucially permit a modular approach to IT in the NHS, where tools can be pulled and replaced with better alternatives as they develop. But let's think of the user needs we can meet. I mean, this is about making it easier to put critical information in clinicians' hands wherever they are, enable better call streaming, queue management, patient flagging, and a greater range of tools if they're needed, and it gives suppliers a more stable environment architecture to develop against, and for national commissioners, it's about that consistent data reporting, system observability. And I think, just to link back to James's point, the desire for IU-CDS, exactly is going to need this this open standards-based approach. So it's no use just writing spec without it being used. I'm happy to say we're working with some of the citizen health tech teams on putting this app into this specification into operation with our GP Online consultation suppliers. I think digital has a lot of potential for this because it's a bit more greenfield and less business transformation required. So we're targeting that first. And really then just looking at the policy levers, working with NHSX to figure out how we can move the system to open standards. This isn't the glamorous stuff, and thanks for bearing with me in the demo. The test harness is kind of as glamorous as it gets, but this is the foundational building blocks that then lead to wider system transformation. And I think the comment on the panel, I think from Maureen was, we make things too complex. Well, this is complex, but I think this is doing the hard work to make things simple for patients and clinicians. It's fixing the plumbing. Thank you very much, everyone. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Chris.